We're rolling. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode number 2 of Talk Hard. I'm back here with Mike Sheehan. What up, Mike?
What's going on, everybody? Good to be here.
And we're going to do this again, I guess.
Well, what happened?
We're going to do an episode again, man.
Oh, I thought
that was a
that was my bad. All right. Sorry.
Whatever.
So I'm bald, but blonde. So that's what happened. My bad.
You're saying you had a blonde moment.
Oh my God.
Cheers to Mike and his blonde moment.
Yep. Cheers. Right here. Absolutely.
So we're going to do this again, right? Coming back for a second time.
Absolutely.
Thank you for all of you who tuned in the first time. We appreciate it. And if you want more and more of Talk Hard, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell so that you're notified when these come out. We are definitely going to do our best to push it out to the social media channels and all that. But shit, we're busy. We may forget every now and then. I'm going to use busy instead of old.
Make sure you guys share it with your friends. If you liked it and you enjoy it and you think somebody else might too, let them know about it.
For sure, for sure. So what's on the agenda for tonight, Mike? What's going on?
So I think tonight, I think it's, we call this podcast Talk Hard.
Right.
And I feel like everybody needs to know why we call it Talk Hard.
All right, fair enough.
And there's a reason. There's actually a method to our madness. There's a reason behind it, and there
usually is. It doesn't mean we're on the right track, but there's a fucking method.
Yeah, well, there's a method to the madness. Sometimes that method is madness. But yeah, so back in 1990, right? For those of you who don't know, right, and it's important to remind you guys that our goal is to bring you life from the Gen X perspective. Well, back in 1990, Gen Xers were in high school, and a movie came out called Pump Up the Volume.
Yep.
And it starred Christian Slater, and it was about a guy who moved from, was it New York? It was New York, right?
Yep.
Okay, a guy who moved from New York, and he moved to a suburb of Phoenix that was really kind of like track housing under development.
Yeah, super culture shock.
Yeah, for sure. And his parents moved him away from his friends, but they bought him was it shortwave radio? I think in the movie he says shortwave radio. I don't know if that's the same as a ham radio. I have no idea. But they bought him a shortwave radio in the hopes that he might be able to communicate with some friends back home. And so every night, he would just start talking to the airwaves, and it turned out local high schoolers heard him, and it became a local phenomenon in that area, in the movie anyway. And back in, was it 2020, beginning of 2020, I think it was. I had texted G because.
We were playing around with podcasts back then too.
G and I each had separate podcasts back then, and I had texted him about this movie. I'd seen it on TV, and I was like, you know what? Because I love the movie. It's still a great movie.
Absolutely.
And I had texted him saying, hey, did Pump Up the Volume predict podcasting?
Right,
and that became a conversation. So. And his response was, and G, I'll let you tell him your response.
Yeah, for sure. So my response is, first of all, oh shit, I totally remember that movie. That was my initial response. And after that, it was, I think I need to watch it again. I need to dive a little bit into what Mike's talking about and try and figure that out, only because anytime I get a good question posed to me, curiosity takes over and I've got to dive in head first. So I go ahead, find the movie, I watch it, and all of a sudden all the nostalgia starts coming back and you start remembering, shit, this movie dealt with some pretty heady topics. It dove deep into the psyche of teenagers, all kinds of crap like that. Also, it spoke to, you know, being held down by the man, whether that be the government or the education system or whatever, all parents, that the whole 9 yards, right? So it dealt with
It basically dealt with the shit that Gen X deals with and
Well,
dealt with at the time.
for sure. And what we come to find out is not a lot of things have changed. But to go back and answer your question, Mike, what I did find out or figure out for myself was that while it may not have predicted podcasting, it was certainly a precursor to podcasting. It
Yeah.
was for the time if you wanted to do that back in 1990, first of all, you had to have the equipment, which was probably costly, which why his parents had to buy it for him to bribe him to go out to the suburbs
Right.
of Phoenix. But also, you had to actually steal the airwaves. It was against federal regulations for him to actually go on and create what was called a pirate radio station,
Right.
and put his thoughts and feelings out into the world. And what are some of the things that he talked about, Mike? I mean, specifically.
So he talked about, and this is what amazed us about the movie, and I guess still amazes us about the movie. And one of the reasons that we named this podcast Talk Hard, and that is that the movie dealt with suicide. The movie dealt with homosexuality, coming out of the closet, the way that was dealt with in 1990, but the way many people still deal with it and think about it today. It dealt with societal views of different groups. The loners versus the jocks versus the screw ups, the fuck ups, and versus the princess in high school,
Right, the ASB types, the perfectionists, the straight A getters, all that.
And society was viewed, in my opinion, was the parents. Parents represented society, and the way the parent and the parents' expectations of the child and how the child responded to that, and the pressures of life and the pressures of just being a fucking teenager and growing up in that time period where you had these expectations of who you were. And what he was doing is he was basically speaking out. In the end, what he began doing was speaking out initially, and he covers this in the movie. Initially, he talks about how, my parents bought me this equipment so that I could communicate with my friends back home. But by the end of the movie, he'd become a mouthpiece for
his generation, or
for that generation,
at least the community around him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And back in 2020, when G and I were first talking about this on my old podcast, we kind of realized and discovered that these things are still happening today. And so that movie is super relevant.
Absolutely.
And you have to speak out. You have to make your voice heard. You have to say what you feel, say what you mean what you say it with conviction, and have that belief. Make sure you back it up with action, right? All of these kinds of things. And that is really encapsulated in what Christian Slater's character says at the end, which is talk hard. And you actually hear his voice saying talk hard in our intro. And it's the very end of that movie where he's saying it. And so that's
from
where
the
this
paddy
whole thing
wagon,
came
by
from.
the way.
Yeah, right. Just before he gets shipped off to jail.
Exactly. Another thing that, looking back, that we learned, and I observed as I watched the movie again, was that it's interesting how, first of all, these issues perpetuate, right? Generation after generation. We may call them different things. We may medicate from them differently.
Right.
And we may deal with them in different ways, but at the root, there's a commonality. These things are still the same, right? It's who am I? in this world? How do I fit into this world? Is there hope for me in the future? What am I going to
Yes.
be? Do I fit into the crowd? Do I not fit into the crowd? How do I react? All these things that go through young people's minds, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, if we dive into that a little bit more, if you don't mind, Mike, what was it like for you back in 1990? That would have made you what, a junior in high school, a sophomore?
Yeah, I think I was a
You
sophomore
were a
in high
sophomore,
school.
yeah,
I graduated in '92,
right.
so I was a sophomore in high school, and it's important to understand here that both GR and I are, regardless of what generational scale or dates you look at, we are smack in the middle of Gen X. So we
True.
are literally these true. This is our time in 1990. In 1990, as a sophomore, I always kind of make it a joke that I was one of 5 white kids at my high school.
Hacienda
That's
Heights, huh?
that's not true. That's not true. But I was
But was that your world?
definitely.
Like, was that the world you saw around yourself?
That's how I felt. Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't. I had, I hung out. There were a lot of white kids, but I didn't hang out with many of them. I only hung out with a couple, right? And the world that I saw was black, Hispanic. I relate to that movie with from the side of trying to fit in,
Okay.
right? Trying to fit in with the group of friends that you have, and because you realize that you don't quite fit the mold. You don't you don't they're your friends, and they may not even be judging you, right? But
Right.
at 1990, I was 16. I had
Exactly.
turned 16 in March of 1990, and at 16, I don't know who is and isn't judging me. I know that I'm judging me, and I'm judging me based off of my experiences. And so the whole nature versus nurture thing, and Gen X, we all grew up, we were turnkey kids, you
Latchkey
know,
kids.
latchkey kids. Sorry, turnkey would be a totally different phrase. Yeah, latchkey. We were latchkey
But we
kids,
were definitely
and
turning the key to get in the damn house.
yeah, that's what I meant,
Or if you're me, lose it and trying to break in the back window.
Awesome. But so what was it like for you?
So for me, 1990, I'm a junior in high school. Interestingly enough, the year prior, my parents had actually uprooted me from LA over into Palm Springs. So for me, that was a huge culture shock. By my junior year, I spent a lot of time kind of pissed off at my parents for doing that to me. Right at that age, it was the end of my world. I
And
had
you had kind of the opposite culture shock that I did, didn't you?
right? And what was weird is now I was fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. I think looking back now, I can say fortunately, but as a kid, we moved around a lot. So I could fit in. I could find a way to at least fit into different groups and latch on to a couple different groups and meld myself in or whatever and be okay. But I never really felt like I was a part of one particular group.
Right.
I guess I just kind of was like a chameleon, if you will. Whoever I was hanging out with the time, I could
Yeah.
blend in and do the damn thing, and then weave my way to the next group, and that's what it was. But I spent a lot of time angry at my parents for moving me there, trying to run away back to the LA area.
Mhm.
I would once I got my license, drive back, ditch school, get in trouble. One time I actually got a ticket on the way back.
Oh
Um,
no. Hard
and
to
that
hide that.
sucked. That sucked because I had to take my mom to court with me because I was still a minor, all that kind of stuff. So for me, it was really just trying to get by while being pissed off at my parents, not really having any type of aim or direction, and really just muddling through, I
Right.
guess
And
is
while
it.
I mentioned what I mentioned, I didn't attach myself to any specific group at school, which was always interesting to me. I played football, I was in band. right? I'm the only kid to ever get kicked out of marching band. Um,
I doubt that, but I mean, come on.
certainly feels like it. I mean, how do you get kicked out of band? I did it. Uh, you know, I hung out with the undesirable crowd. I hung out with the smart kids. I hung out with the jocks. I hung out with the band geeks. You know, they weren't geeks, but that's what you call them. You know, the band geeks. I could bounce from group to group, and I think my learning to do that was because I didn't really feel like I completely fit in any one of them.
Yeah,
And
that
so
makes sense to me
when you spoke
because
of being
same.
being a chameleon, I can that resonates with me. I can relate to that, you know, because I could just bounce around, and I was friends with everybody. You know, everybody knew me. Everybody was fine with me. I didn't have any issues with anybody, and it was really just because I would bounce around these different groups. But when I was outside of school, I hung out with a specific group of people, and that's the group of people that I was describing earlier.
So
And you know,
what?
another funny thing is, you know, I had a complete misconception in high school. I went to school and I thought, you know what, cool kids don't do homework. And no, seriously, I thought cool kids don't do homework, and so I would go home and I'd be waiting for my friends to call me and be ready to go, you know, hang out. They were home doing homework, and I was home not doing homework because I thought that's what cool kids did, right? And I mean, that's where my disconnect came in. I had 2 hours after I got home to do homework, but I'm like, no, they're not doing it. I'm not going to do it. That's what cool. You know, it's that kind of a we don't recognize, and this is what I take from the movie. We don't recognize the truth about the societal norms or the truth about the societal expectations at that age. We only understand what we think those expectations are, and we're often wrong.
Well,
And
absolutely. Like we
and that's what I
think
think the movie kind
everybody.
of points out.
I agree with that. I think at that time, I thought that it was a rite of passage and that everybody smoked cigarettes, and that
Right.
was a big thing back then. Anyways, I think at that time, a lot of people trying to be cool
Hmm.
smoked cigarettes. I think that was more predominant over. I think today in today's society, it might be weed or vaping. Is what's taken the place of what for us was smoking cigarettes.
Right.
Um, but that was the thing, right? And so, I mean, at that time, I could get my hands on cigarettes pretty much anywhere. You could buy them out of a vending machine at Bob's Big Boy,
Oh, right.
or for those of you know who know what the hell Bob's Big Boy is, but you could get your hands on there. I you know friends' parents would have them lying around the house or whatever. I mean, it was just easy to get a hold of cigarettes back then.
In my house, when my dad found out that I smoked, the response was, "Well, the carton's in the freezer."
See, my parents wouldn't have had any of that. And so
Yeah.
for me, it was always hide it and do it. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I did it at a young age and it continued until my 20s. But that's what it was for me. And then also just, okay, now I've moved on from cigarettes to smoking weed, right? Tried that in
Right.
high school. And I wouldn't say that was an everyday thing for me, but it was something I did to be cool, right?
Hmm.
Because the cool kids were doing it, and you're trying to fit in, and that was certainly a huge
And,
thing back then.
and let's be specific there. It's the kids that you perceived
Yeah,
were cool. That's the
absolutely.
thing. That's where the perception was completely off because yeah, I did the same thing. I remember the first time I smoked weed. I was 15. It was midterms, my sophomore year, midterms, and we were in some guy's van, and we were hotboxing. I didn't know what any of that was. I had no idea. I was just smoking weed, and we had to go take our midterms,
Oh
and like
shit.
I couldn't walk down the stairs. I had to walk off campus and around to go down because I was a mess. And all I remember is I remember putting my head down, or I remember having my head down in my English class, right? Mrs. Unchitty, sorry, I was stoned. I had my head down. I remember lifting my head up, looking at the guy in front of me, and putting my head back down. I got a 96 on that final.
Way to go.
I don't remember a thing about it. Woke up later on my bed with a huge headache, right? But I didn't stop there. You know, that progressed to by the time I was 16 doing cocaine because the cool kids were doing cocaine.
Sure, and it was the late 80s, early 90s, so that was the cool thing.
That was the drug of choice, yeah. And so it's that kind of a, you know, when you watch this movie, it's this perception is reality, falsehood.
Well, even if you just come off the movie part of it, it was just reality, right? I mean, I remember the first time I smoked weed, and interestingly enough, it was on a church trip. A family.
That's awesome.
A family church trip. A friend of mine had a little dime bag of weed. We had nothing to smoke
That's
it.
great.
We had nothing to smoke it out of, so we took a Coke can and made
Soda
a
can,
makeshift pipe out of a Coke can. So we wasted almost all of the dime bag, and of course, back in at that time, I think it was 1990. Actually, it was shitty dirt weed.
Oh yeah.
And I got high for the first time, and it was stupid because, interestingly enough, on this family church trip, there's the girl that I'm infatuated with. She's on this trip too, right? And I'm acting
Family
like an
church.
idiot, and because I'm trying to be cool and I'm high at the same time and trying to spit game. It was a hot fucking mess.
Right.
And I mean, all the stupid things that I could have done, I did.
Oh yeah.
Right in that one little sequence of time. And I think that looking back, it's like, thank God, I was a better parent than I was a teenager.
Thank God our kids are we're better teenagers than we were.
Absolutely.
That's all I have to say.
I 100% agree with that.
For context, for those of you guys listening or watching right now, G and I have known each other now for 20 years.
No, 30 years.
20. Wait. I should do math better. 30 years. We have known each other for 30 years. And we've been through it. Absolutely. And we have both been
a lot of stuff we're not even going to say on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. No, forget it. Yeah. And we have been blessed with kids who are exactly the opposite of us. And that in itself is a freaking miracle.
That's for sure. But I'm still going to pat ourselves on the back. I think it was because at some point we recognized that it was time to grow up. It was time to grow out. It was time to learn from all the stupid shit that we did. But let's get back to talk hard and actually what Mike brought up earlier. Is something that resonates with me. And talk hard isn't necessarily a cry to actually just shoot off at the mouth. I think it's something that, for me anyways, is you need to kind of be a little bit reflective of the things that you're learning along the way and be able to speak to those lived experiences, whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent, to not be afraid to bring those out and speak about them. I think that one of the things that I didn't have growing
and to
up,
be honest with yourself about them.
100%, absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to say cheers to that, because until I started being honest with myself, and I'm talking about even into adulthood, shit was difficult, right? And when you kind of start pointing the finger back at yourself when things go sideways, that's when life really gets easy, is when you're willing to be accountable and take the blame for the dumb shit. But going back to my thought,
that's part of why we're here. Right?
I agree, 100%.
So on the first podcast, and we'll say it over and over, and it's on our social media stuff. It's two Gen Xers talking about the world from a Gen X perspective, and to do that, we have to have been self-reflective, learn from our mistakes, and recognize where we screwed up, so that we can then be honest and lend our voice now.
Right. Now, let's ask this, Mike. I know for me, I certainly at that time didn't think that I could speak about these things. And I think it was even a sign of those times where when shit went sideways, you held it in, you dealt with it, you pushed through. You didn't
Oh, yeah.
tell your parents about it. You didn't reach out to teachers or counselors or anybody else for that matter. You just kind of push through.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what this movie is saying is, hey, look, you're not the only one going through this kind of shit. You're not the only one who feels like maybe, life is shitty and that you're having thoughts of suicide. A lot of people do. There are a lot of people who, have this expectation of what they think they need to accomplish in life by a certain time, and that they're on an island and they have no one to turn to. And so what ends up happening is they implode in one way or another, and either turn to drugs, turn to whatever that
Right.
medicating method is, whatever makes you feel better. And that still rings true today, right?
Yeah.
And it's even honestly a little bit easier today. Drugs were taboo, a little more taboo when we were the age of teenagers and young adults today.
In all fairness, drugs were a lot safer back then too.
True.
I gotta say,
I don't even want to fuck with this fentanyl shit. Like,
Oh, serious.
you cannot do drugs like we did today without being super fucking scared.
Yeah, you can't even trust them.
Not at all.
You just
But-
can't. If it's white and powdery, who knows what the hell it is?
Exactly. And that should be scary enough. But the point of the matter is that there are other people out there doing this. I had a friend, so I cleaned out my loft the other day. And what was kind of weird is I found a suicide note from a friend who killed himself when he was 19 years old.
Oh, wow.
It was actually right before I moved out into the desert to live with you, Mike,
Okay.
that this happened. And it was crazy reading that today at almost 50 years old, 49 years old, right? Just turned 49 last week. And so we're talking a 30-year difference of when I first received that and looked at it, and then looking at it again 30 years later and being like, what the fuck were you thinking, Steve? Like,
Wow.
the world wasn't that difficult, but to him it was. And if you
Yeah.
read this note, I mean, he was in pain. So it's not like the pain wasn't real, but he really didn't think he had an out.
Wow. I don't even know where to go with that.
It will.
That's-
I think
crazy.
where we go is that knowing what I know now and knowing how I felt when I read that the first time is if you're out there listening to this, whether you're 19 or you're 49 and your world is crashing in around you, reach out.
Reach out. Yeah, for sure.
Reach out no matter what. We all have shitty times. I mean, I know I've had thoughts of suicide throughout the years, especially when I was younger. It's not an easy thing to deal with. I know now that I think that those thoughts were stupid, but at the time they were very real.
Right.
I've never dealt with other issues that are relevant today. But I know that there are things that, there is a whole community out there now that is the LGBT community, and they deal with issues in their own way, in their own right. I can't pretend to know them, but my guess is that the questions are similar, that the thought processes are, is this right? Is this wrong? Am I a bad person?
The hopelessness.
The hopelessness,
Yeah.
am I wrong for thinking this is me? Am I right for thinking this is me? What's at the end of that rainbow? All of that shit that you go through. At the end of the day, talk about it. Find somebody that you can trust. Find somebody that you can get it off your shoulders. If there's nobody that you think you can trust, at least seek it out, because you know, there's help out there. And that's one of the things that I really learned at an older age is that you can't go about this life alone.
Right.
I was homeless at one time, literally living out on the streets um, in a duffel bag. And I've slept in the back of pickup trucks. I've slept in parks. I've slept in all kinds of weird places. And if it weren't for the help of friends, Mike, you even being one of them, you took me in at one time when I didn't have a place to sleep, and there were a few other people as well. And if it weren't for people out there like you, like these other friends that were took me in, I could not be here now. So you can't go about it alone. And at the end of the day, open up just a little bit. So that to me is what talking hard is, being able to at least
Yeah.
get something off your chest to let
agree.
people know that it's okay to be vulnerable. Look, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you turn into a pile of mush and you don't, have the fortitude to pick yourself up and want to move forward. That's also definitely a must have. When you hit rock bottom, you got to pick your own ass up, and you've got to be able to say, okay, I've got to do this. There's nothing wrong with asking for help, but that help doesn't mean shit unless you're willing to do the damn work yourself.
Yeah, it's funny. I can mirror almost exactly your story. Um, I remember the week before, and this is super funny. The week before if I could come back home, I was working at Camelot Park out in Palm Springs,
I love
and
that.
I had been evicted from my apartment, and everything I owned was in my car, but my car was broken down, and there was too much stuff in there, so sleeping in my car wasn't really an option without losing things.
True.
And so I think one night I couch surfed, and the rest of the week I actually slept on one of the miniature golf course holes.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, until I finally at the end of that week, and I would get up and I would wake up as the sun came up because that's what happens, and I would get out of there until they opened, and then I would go into the bathroom there, and I'd kind of wet my hair down and rinse my face off as best I had, and I did that for about a week, and I was like, dude, I've got to call my dad, and I had to humble myself. I had to, it felt humiliating, but it
Right.
was a good experience, and that was the beginning of my road back up. But yeah, I had to do that, and I'm not gonna lie, man. I don't know where you were at that time. I don't know where Joe was at that time, but it was one of those things where I didn't feel I could call anybody. I didn't want to admit that stuff. I didn't want to. I didn't. I felt that was me,
Yeah,
and I felt alone, and I
100%.
felt that I was the only one who was ever going through that, and I didn't want to admit that to anybody else. I didn't even admit it to my dad. I just asked him if I could come back home. Yeah, I didn't. I
Yeah.
never told him about that, and it rings true to what you're saying, which is, hey, you feel like you're alone, but you're not, and all you have to do is reach out a little bit and realize that people got your back.
Absolutely.
You know?
And interestingly enough, people will surprise you.
Yeah.
I, at one point, was taken in by a coworker who had no business taking me in because, one, she was barely making it as it was. She had two young kids. We knew each other from work, but it's not like we were actually close. And her family even told her, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, you don't know what this dude's gonna do." But she did. And that to was kind of my road back to having a little bit of stability, to
Yeah.
actually get up off the ground get a new job, start moving forward, right? And I will never ever forget this, until the day I die, how everything that society told her, that her own family, everybody said, don't do this. And every indication was, don't let this young man into your home. And she said, you know what? I know it's going to be okay. She may not have 100%, but somehow it worked out. And so you never know where that person, where that lifeline is going to be. And I mean, we ran the gamut, Mike. I mean, we don't have to we don't have to get into details, but quite honestly, we've dealt with loss. We've dealt with loss as far as love interest when we were young. We dealt with loss. We've dealt with drugs. We've dealt with.
We should have died many times.
Oh, you have no idea. Yeah. And at the end of it, for some reason, we were fortunate enough to come out the other side. And if people were,
there's a plan.
If people were in this day and age would let their guard down enough, and I think you said the key word a little bit earlier, if they were humble enough to make that phone call. And don't get me wrong, that phone call is not always going to turn out right. I made that phone call to my dad too. Well, just after, when I was sleeping in a park, some guy came, was asking me to help him go for a ride somewhere, and he just crazy shit. I told him no. He ends up pulling a knife on me, and that freaked me the fuck out. Enough to actually call my dad. It didn't quite work out the same way yours did. My dad said, no, I ain't coming to pick you up. So it doesn't always work out that way, but that goes back to, you never know who's going to be the one to throw you that lifeline. So don't give up, reach out a little bit further, whatever it takes. And look,
for sure.
I'm not naive enough to say that the world isn't a nasty, nasty place, and it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. But I think that there's,
I hear you.
I think that there's hope. I think that you and I and our group of friends, like, we did some dumb shit. Like dumb shit. To your point, we should have died many times. We should have been in prison many times.
Well, and the thing is, talking hard is confronting that, facing that, coming to grips with it, and doing better. I'm not going to be perfect tomorrow, but the goal is to be better than I was today. And little by little, you realize that, oh, you know what? I did that. I was able to do that. I decided I was going to do it. I did it. And maybe it was unsuccessful, but I did it.
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't become what I wanted it to do. I mean, I've written short films. I've written a full-length feature screenplay. I'm on IMDb. We'll figure that one out. I'm on IMDb as an actor, director, producer. Never made any money, but I decided at one point that I wanted to do this. And I wanted to do it for a period of time. And I just shut up and did it. I just went out and did it. And now I can say I did that. You know what I mean? And so it's a matter of just confronting that, not being afraid to push forward, not being afraid to fail, because we all fail. It's what we do after that failure is what matters. That's what builds character. That's what defines who you are, Yes.
I think that you put that really well, as far as what defines you isn't your failures.
Right.
And it's your reaction to those failures. And that actually dives into where I wanted to take this next, as we failed forward, if you will, from when we first met and to where we are now. And Mike and I have seen each other grow up.
Oh yeah.
Through the teenage years, through our young adult years, and even through adulthood. It has never been an easy road. It has certainly got easier as we've recognized our mistakes, what we can do to be better, and all of those things. And what Mike just said is the key is don't let your failures define you. And really just keep moving forward.
Yeah.
We have so many blessings, so many things that I'm grateful for now. I mean, I have a roof over my head. The bills are paid. The kids are damn near grown up. I've got 3 adult kids who are thriving right now and doing what they're doing.
Same.
And
Yeah.
Mike's the same. I mean, you're about
I'm
to be
about
a
to be a
grandfather.
grandfather.
And I
Yeah.
mean, dude, Cass is freaking adorable right now. I see the pictures that she posts.
So
Holy
excited.
shit! From seeing her as a baby to seeing
yeah.
her as her to about to become a mother. Holy shit! I mean,
It's amazing. Yeah.
me and Mike grew up thinking that, in a time where, being hard was the thing at a time and you had to prove that but you see a picture like Cass online as she posts it because she's living in Florida right now and we're in California. And does that not fucking make you mushier than mushy?
Oh, dude, I'm so excited. I can't wait to hold that kid. I can't wait to hold my grandson and cry. You know what I mean?
Like that. I'm a big
Yeah.
sucker these days. I can wait. Look, Maisie, Anissa, Alex, Jacob. I can wait to be a grandfather. But
Right.
holy shit, when that happens, it's going to be ridiculous.
Oh yeah. I'm super excited. I don't think she even realizes how excited I am. And I got, honestly, it's just a few more weeks and she's going to have that kid and I'm going to get to go to Florida and see my grandson.
Yeah.
My favorite. I texted her this morning. I said, "How's my favorite grandson?"
Right. So let me
My
ask
only
this.
grandson, but my favorite.
Let me ask this. I mean, let's get to being able to we talked about the bullshit that we went through, right? But something practical for somebody who might be listening right now that didn't go through, went through that, they're going through it now. What is something that you think that you can share with somebody who might be listening right now, who might just be having these thoughts go through their head that this shit's hard, adulthood's hard, or growing into beginning to adulting is hard. I think that's what they're calling it these days. I don't fucking know.
Beginning, like adulting
Yeah,
101.
like adulting 101, right? Exactly. Like,
Right.
so what is something that you think you learned along the way, or something that you could give as a nugget that people might be able to put in their pocket and say, okay, this helps?
I've always, for some weird reason, and I don't know why, and maybe I haven't always been this way. I'm trying to think. I feel like I've always been this way. I've always been one who didn't focus on negativity. Like if something is negative, I look at the positive. And I even dealt with it a little bit today. I deal with it every day, and I look at something, and it's easy negativity is easy, right?
I agree.
Falling into a negative mode, that's easy. Finding the good in every day, that's harder, but it's also more rewarding.
Okay. Yeah. I look at it as
that would be my advice is find the good in what's happening in your life. Find, you say, oh my God, my car got repossessed. I got evicted, but I got a new job, right? I got fired, but I've got this car. I've got, you know what I mean? I'm not, I'm behind on bills, but I have food.
Mhm.
There's always something, and it's hard to do that, but I do try to find that good thing in things,
Yeah.
And I'm, like I'm the guy on the freeway who will let you in. You know what I mean? I'm that guy though these days,
Well, yeah, these days,
I'll
sure.
let you in. Go as fast as I want you to, but I'll let you in.
That's hilarious.
But
yeah,
but that's the thing is you have to kind of you gotta. I mean, we're both pushing 50, so I'm starting to realize, and it's funny. I think I told you. I'll tell everybody else right now. I had a realization on the way home from work a few months ago that I've only got about 30 years left on this earth, and I got really depressed for a minute. I was like, oh, because up until that point, I was never gonna die. And, you know, I still think of myself as 25. And at 25, we're not looking at the end. And all of a sudden, just for like just a couple minutes, maybe not even a minute, while I'm driving, I was crushed at the fact that I've only got a limited amount of time. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm on the downhill side. And then if I think about it though, and I think about my life and the things that I've screwed up and the bad decisions that I've made and the bad things that I've done, they've all turned me into who I am now.
Yes.
And they've all formed me into this. And so, I was talking to a friend of mine when I was actually buying this house, and he asked me, he was my real estate agent, and he asked me, he said, hey, if you could go back, would you change things? And I said yes. And he goes, really? It made you who you are? And I didn't get a chance to explain to him that, you know, I wouldn't change who I am now. And I wouldn't want to change who I am now or the experiences that I had. But if I could go back and do my homework, I probably would have done my homework. You know what I mean? It's those kinds of things where I'm like, I know now, I didn't know then, you know, and that didn't form me into who I am now, you know, but you know, those choices that we make, they help mold us. And believe it or not, you're gonna come out on the other side, no matter what.
Right.
You're gonna come out on the other side. There's no way around coming out on the other side.
One way or another, you're going to come out on the other side. I wholeheartedly agree. I take a little bit of a different approach. I wouldn't change a thing. And only because instead of, I think what happens a lot to people is it gets hard, and that hard is the obstacle, right? And that's when they quit. That's when they just throw their hands up and that's it. And for me, I've learned to embrace that obstacle and think that the obstacle is the way. And that's stealing from Marcus Aurelius. And what I found out is that, look, no one says you have to run through the obstacle, but if you can either go over it, through it, under it, around it, just find a way. Right.
The goal is to overcome it.
And the goal is to overcome it.
Right.
And it's not to run away from it, because then what happens is that obstacle is your where you're going to learn. Right. And it's going to help you. It's going to help you define new patterns in life and find new wavelengths and new ways to navigate this bullshit thing that we call life.
And running away from it becomes a lost opportunity.
I like that. That's awesome. And so for me, that's what that is. And that's why I wouldn't change it. Not doing my homework. And look, I just was not cut out for school, period. End of story. That was not my thing. That's not me. Now for my daughter, that is her thing, and she's excelling in it, and she's doing great things for herself. And I love watching her do that. But there's this other thing inside of me that wants to scream out, don't fucking do it. But that's not my life, right? So whatever. She can do her. But
she's got to learn.
She's got to learn. But to your point, Mike, regardless of how you look at it, how I look at it, I think the convergence is that you're going to come out the other side one way or another. And if you're willing to do a little bit of work, take a little bit of pain, and find your way through to the other side, it's going to be worth it.
It's going to be worth it. Yeah, absolutely.
100%. So, you know, I think that at the end of the journey, when I'm old and done, for me now, like you said, you had that realization, right? Like I only have 30 years left.
Yeah.
And, I had that realization too. For me, it was a little bit different. For me, it actually pushed me. I'm also of the mind that, you know, today could be it. So fuck it. I'm doing everything I gotta do. You know, life could end at any moment, and I'm going to make the most of it every moment to every moment. And at the same time,
Yeah.
for me, it's look, when I'm dead and gone, my goal is to leave a little bit of me, whether it's with my kids, whether it's with one of my staff, whether it's with a customer of mine, whoever it is, to where they can pass that along. And to me, that's what makes life worthwhile, right?
Yeah,
Some people call it
definitely.
leaving a legacy. I don't know what to call it. I'm not necessarily trying to put a pretty word on it or tie it up with a bow, but I think we owe it to future generations to leave a little bit of a roadmap so they can kind of, use that as a compass to figure it out.
Yeah,
I think that the
for sure.
nature leaves a North Star, right? Polaris is the North Star. And I think it's up to us to do what we can to leave a little bit of a North Star to future generations.
No, I agree. No, I like that.
Right on. So we kind of hit a lull here. We got a little we got a little into it, but
Yeah, a little bit.
I
Why don't
think
we
it
go
was
wrap it up?
I think it was worth it. I think we should wrap it up. Hey guys, you know what I think this episode is really telling us is that life is fucking worth living. It can get shitty at times. You can be pissed off at the world at times, but you know what? Fuck it. Find a way. Find a
'em all.
fucking way. Your license plate. Your Mike's new license plate says "fuck them all." True Gen X fashion. But
Hell
look,
yeah.
we want to thank you for if you made it this far. We
Hey,
appreciate
thanks for
you.
taking the time. We got deep, guys. We got deep, and we got deeper probably than we meant to. But we bared a bit of ourselves, and don't let that go unnoticed.
We definitely did. Next time, it's probably not going to be as deep because it's going to be a fun. It's going to be a fun discussion on the next one. Can't wait for you guys to come back and listen to that.
For sure.
Don't forget, if you're going to go want more of this stuff, like, subscribe, all that other cool stuff. Smash the bell. Here's the little thing that comes up right now, just because it's what everybody else is doing, right? That's what this episode
Right on.
alluded to in the first place. So I'm gonna leave that funny. Mike, do you have any messages to the folks?
No, you know what? Speak your truth. Talk hard.
Talk
That's
hard.
what I would say.
And we're out.
All right. Hold on. I got to pee.